Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to the Clinton School. My name is Skip Rutherford, the Dean, and I appreciate you being here this afternoon. May I ask everyone to please turn your cell phones and other electronic devices off. Thank you. In the business and professional world today, the importance of philanthropy has taken on a broad new meaning and scope, and we at the Clinton School have recently established our own Center for Community Philanthropy, focusing on how small towns, organizations, and others can participate in this important subject. And we have a wonderful speaker today to address that issue as it continues to be an important aspect of our lives. To introduce the speaker is a person that you've seen at many of these events, a graduate of Lyon College, the Director of Development at the Clinton School, and one who works very closely with me in the programming of the school. Please welcome Eric Wilson.
Whose bios I read as I prepared for this discussion today, I think it's really people like them. That's precisely what we're hoping to produce in the work that we undertake as well at Goldman Sachs as we look out on the kind of young people who will be needed to become the leaders of tomorrow's global society. I want to thank you all for your interest in philanthropy. Public attention is very often focused on government, of course, and on business developments. But this independent sector that I'm a part of, the third sector is what we call it, the sector in which people give up time, money, and know-how to advance human welfare and the common good, is increasingly important, has been important always, but is increasingly important today. It's very, very powerful in ways that I think we need to talk about for a moment. To just give you a sense of the world of philanthropy and nonprofits as it exists today, in 2006, corporations, individuals, and foundations' total giving amounted to more than $295 billion. Perhaps even more significantly, over 4/5 of adult Americans reported giving from their own resources to charity. That's actually a much higher percentage than the number of adult Americans who voted. Within the next 10 years, annual charitable giving in the United States is expected to rise to $316 billion. And at the current pace of growth, 11 new foundations and 119 new nonprofits being created in the U.S. every day, the nonprofit sector is the fastest growing sector of the economy. So all of this means that philanthropy is a field that wields tremendous influence over solutions to social problems. It's a field with the power to be nimble and strategic, and the power to support promising new ideas and to turn public attention to critical issues. It's a field with the power to transform society. And let's just take a look at the historic work of Andrew Carnegie and the Carnegie Corporation in creating over 2,500 libraries around the world. Let's take a look at the transformative work of what is now being called an old philanthropy, the Ford Foundation, along with many other donors that helped to break down apartheid in South Africa. Take a look at the thrilling achievements of the Clinton Foundation in expanding life-saving medicines and helping developing countries systematize their approach to HIV/AIDS treatment. Philanthropy has supported the Green Revolution, the Civil Rights Movement, and inner-city development. And so your interest in philanthropy could not be more timely. The field's always been exciting, and it's growing in new and impactful ways. I'm hoping to spend our time together talking about what I see as some of these changes and the growth in philanthropy today. These are trends that affect my work at the Goldman Sachs Foundation, but they're not just trends that affect us in the world of philanthropy. They're much more than trends of the moment. They're long-term shifts in thinking about philanthropy across society, in technologies that enable new approaches to philanthropy, and in the ways individuals and corporations do what we like to call social investing today. I'd like to think I coined that, but maybe somebody else out there came up with that one before I did. So for you students who are in this audience, as you build or further public service careers, whatever particular path you may take, these trends will affect your work. As a means of beginning to illustrate how these trends play out in philanthropy, let me tell you a little bit about what we do at our foundation. Goldman Sachs Foundation is kind of uniquely positioned in the sense that we have one foot on Wall Street and one foot in the world of philanthropy. And so, hence the social investing model. First and foremost, we have focused on promoting innovation in education and developing young people. And we do have a global mandate. We try to do that on what has grown to be about $300 million. And it's not too easy to do. It's a big world out there to cover, lots of complexity and lots of challenges. One of the ways we try to tackle that is by combining with our financial giving our people's business skills. And we call that venture philanthropy, and I will talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. At the foundation, we strongly believe that we all need smart people from every segment of society to tackle the challenges that lie ahead for us in the 21st century. So clearly, we cannot afford to abandon, especially young people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. The unfortunate fact, though, is, as we all know, if you look at our situation today, there are vast numbers of incredibly talented young people who come from just those kinds of disadvantaged backgrounds and are left out of the opportunity cycle that we make available to so many others. And so at Goldman Sachs Foundation, one of the things we tried to do was to create a program to tackle that particular challenge head on, and it's called the Next Generation Venture Fund. It identifies and invests in talented young people, starting from 8th grade, right on through high school and through college, with the goal of developing their academic and leadership abilities. Our hope is essentially to put these young people in the pipeline to be that next generation of leaders that we so desperately need. There's one young lady that has really caught our eye because she's a clear emblem of our program. She's a kid who came out of Los Angeles. Parents, 3 brothers and sisters, family income of less than $30,000 a year, neither parent with more than a high school education. She attends an inner city high school that is 96% other Hispanic kids, and where over 2/3 of the kids are poor, as judged by their eligibility for free lunches. No individual attention whatsoever in the school. The teachers would be the first to say that they feel overstretched and are not able to focus on the students who seem to be doing well. So in the 8th grade, this young lady became a part of our program and became a venture fund scholar. During the course of her 8th grade and high school years, she was given intensive summer sessions on college campuses, advanced online courses, distance education courses during the school year, SAT preparation, entrepreneurship and leadership education, and perhaps most importantly, she became a part of a network of other kids who had similar backgrounds and who were similarly motivated to move past their circumstances. Her parents became involved, as all of the parents in this program do. They were given counseling on how to support their children, how to negotiate with the schools that their daughter attended to get the right class placements and the right kind of preparation for the college application process. So we're very proud to have this young lady, again, as an emblematic figure for our program, accepted early decision to the college of her choice. We know that the program is making a difference because very, very few of the other kids in her school who were not participants in the program were able to even get accepted to any college, and yet she was chosen early decision for the college of her choice. And so far, 4/5 of her peers in our program have gone on to the colleges of their choice as well. So we're hoping, again, to use this as a bit of momentum as we build out this model to establish our foundation as one that is deeply committed to and effective in building a more inclusive generation of future leaders. One of the things that makes this model a bit special to us is that it is a collaborative program. This Next Generation Venture Fund, therefore helps to illustrate what we mean by having one foot on Wall Street. We're essentially setting it up as an investment banking colleague of ours would by bringing together resources from other funders who are as well, if not better positioned than us to contribute to solving this particular problem. We have 25 other funders involved investing in this fund alongside us. And so we don't want to own this problem or exclude others. We want to generate a community of investors who can really move the dial forward on this challenge of too few kids from disadvantaged backgrounds succeeding and becoming leaders. And that takes me to the first trend that I promised to talk about. I see it's up here on our slide screens, and that is collaborative giving. So over the past 10 years, philanthropy has diversified tremendously. In 1996, there were 535 charities in the US, and sounds like a pretty big number, but by 2006, that number had actually increased to more than 900,000. So that's a 70% increase. During the same time period, the number of foundations in the US almost doubled, from 60,000 to over 100,000. Accompanying all this new giving and all of these new nonprofits, and perhaps because of it, philanthropy today is investing jointly, much more of this joint investment going on. An example of this trend in action is a group called Sea Change Partners, which some of you who watch philanthropy may have read about in the Wall Street Journal recently. This is essentially a non-profit investment bank, and it was founded by some former Goldman Sachs bankers whose mission at this point is to put together networks of funders who can support very promising models for education. And so they've recently, in their first trip out, raised $60 million from multiple donors around the country for Teach for America. And I know one of the Clinton School students is actually a veteran of that. So this is a capital raising model borrowed from the for-profit banking world, and it's just beginning to make its impact felt on the sector. Another example of this kind of trend is giving circles. And giving circles are organizations, sometimes very formal and sometimes very informal, where individuals come together to co-invest in nonprofits. There are about 1,000 of them in the US today, we're told, but most of these were just formed since 2000. It's again about pooling resources for greater impact. Warren Buffett's famous gift of more than $30 billion to the Gates Foundation is another variation on this theme. He believes that the Gates Foundation's goals and approaches are powerful, and so why duplicate efforts? Instead, pool resources and increase impact. This trend isn't just about high net worth individuals and donations in the millions and billions of dollars, though. It's about grassroots. In January of this year, the Case Foundation, founded by Steve and Jean Case, the people who started AOL, held a contest some of you might have seen through Facebook and Parade magazine, in which they pledged several $100,000 to the nonprofits that attracted the interest of the greatest number of people. This was a kind of populist philanthropy approach, and it is another exciting part of this trend towards collective giving. It's bringing new people to philanthropy, young people, and people with limited resources who might not otherwise see themselves as philanthropists. The new trend towards pooling resources isn't exclusively about money, though. It's also about pooling ideas, and the global initiative of the Clinton Foundation is a great example of this. It's bringing together some of the smartest people around to pool the capital of their ideas and to move forward on multiple fronts. And so what to make of all of this as we think about where philanthropy is heading? I predict we're going to see a lot more collaborative giving for individuals and institutions, and we're going to see this taking shape in more and more sophisticated ways. There are going to be more firms like this Sea Change firm, because they're just first out of the blocks, but there are many others who are nipping at their heels. It's going to be more micro-philanthropy, like what the Cases are trying to do. And there are going to be more foundations trying to get other foundations and other funders, like we're trying to do, to join in with us. So I think it's going to be an interesting force to shape philanthropy in the years to come. And that leads me directly to our second trend, which is new technologies for giving. Online giving has been around since the 90s, but today, online giving and online philanthropy more broadly is about so much more than online donations. In 2006, online giving in the US increased by more than a third in that 1 year alone, reaching over $1 billion. But few organizations collect more than modest portions of their donations online, and that we think is going to change as well with the advent of a more dynamic web, Web 2.0. It's a little scary to me because I'm just past that generation, but you young people are driving this forward, and the rest of us are watching very excitedly. As the web develops, nonprofits have more and more effective tools at their disposal. Let's call it the generation of Facebook philanthropy. It's showing itself in new opportunities. One is the Heifer International organization that's located right here. In fact, I was very pleased to know that when I arrived. Does everyone know what the Heifer International model is? Because you're probably pretty proud of it, because it really is a trailblazer, and it's a very exciting and unusual kind of development. But this is giving people the opportunity to work with technology to choose exactly the kinds of projects they want to invest in. And that's a very important development. Second case study of technology is the Rockefeller Foundation. Now that's an old, long-standing foundation that has created a new concept. It's Ideas Portal. Early last year, through its website, it began soliciting high-impact ideas from individuals, communities, and nonprofits, the whole gamut. And the technology here isn't revolutionary, but what is revolutionary is inviting people on board to democratize philanthropy. And this is bringing people to work alongside one of our nation's oldest, and some would say more staid, foundations. This is ultimately helping very quickly to surface better ideas for solving problems faster. A further iteration of the idea is the Ashoka Foundation's open source collaborative competitions at changemakers.net. This competition invites people to think about and post online creative solutions to solve problems, but it also invites others to collaborate by tweaking those ideas, asking insightful questions, and providing connections to new resources. Not only do the visitors to this website have the power to choose winners, but they also have the power to shape winning ideas before winners are chosen. And again, a tremendous opportunity to bring the best thinking to bear in solving society's problems. So like everything else today, philanthropy is heading online, and it's not only increasing giving, but connecting back to this idea of more collaborative processes. It's also getting people together in new ways that will truly push the envelope in solving the problems that we face. A word to the students: if I were starting my public service career again, I would definitely be keeping my eye very closely trained on this online stuff. I think there are going to be tremendous opportunities there, and we're only beginning now to get a sense of what they might be. So let me move on to the third trend, and it's connected to the importance of technology in philanthropy. And that's the monumentally important growth in the importance of impact, evaluation, and due diligence, the dreaded due diligence that many nonprofits in the old days didn't want to hear about, but are beginning now to actually lead the way towards. A Wall Street Journal article this December put it well. Givers, especially young business-minded ones, now tend to want more information on how successful a charity's programs are in addressing the issues the charity sets out to resolve. Now, this sounds like it's perfectly reasonable, but it hasn't always been the case. The old accepting attitude of givers has now been replaced with a much more strategic focus. And it's not just true of individual givers. It's true for foundations and corporations and literally across the board. More and more donors want to know exactly how their money is going to be spent and exactly how much progress will be made by the nonprofits in solving specific problems, not just in continuing to operate as they traditionally have. If an organization is working to abolish hunger in America, questions are now common like, well, exactly how many fewer people are going to bed hungry? How successfully is the organization eliminating the root causes of hunger? This trend is related to the new technology, as I mentioned. In an era of instant information and online transparency, we want access to detailed information about the impact of the organizations we support, and not just descriptions of what they do. One result of this trend is a slew of new services emerging to meet donors' due diligence and evaluation needs. Anybody can open up the Chronicle of Philanthropy and you're just wowed by the number of companies that now actually sell their services to conduct due diligence for social investors or funders. Some of these are internet-based. For instance, GiveWell, a new nonprofit that evaluates charities, was just founded by a couple of young people in their 20s and aims explicitly at donors who want to perform better business-style due diligence before giving. To give you a practitioner's perspective, intensive research and evaluation has been a critical part of what we've tried to do at the Goldman Sachs Foundation. We're interested in lots of different things about any organization with which we align our corporate brand, including, of course, starting with whether the mission and vision of the organization is closely enough connected to what we do and the particular form of philanthropy we have to offer. We're interested in the record of achievement of the organization against not only the goals of the organization, but also our specific goals. We're interested in the competitive landscape for the services that the organization provides. The quality of the leadership, not just the CEO, but the board leadership. And we do a very careful review of the background of the board members. We're not only interested in their funding, current funding level, but their entire funding model. How do they look out in the next 5 to 10 years and see their funding progressing? We're also interested in hearing from the organization how they want to be evaluated and how they can produce the best possible evaluation evidence for us. We're looking at quantitative more often than not, as well as qualitative means. And finally, we're very interested in the communications capacities of the organizations we support. Because if you think about it, we're not just going to give the money away, we're going to put our people in there. We're going to work alongside the organization, and I think many more funders are today approaching it in this way in order to solve social problems together. And so while we may be convinced of the merit of this organization's work, we want to make sure they can convince other folks of the merit of their work as well. And so once we choose an organization, we've just begun. They probably wish at that point we'd go away in some cases. In other cases, they seem to like us and want us to stick around. But we're very interested in now focusing in on the collection of data about how these resources are being put to use. And again, about the communications as we go along, what we're learning. Sometimes things don't work. Well, I think funders are a lot more open today to making sure that even the difficulties encountered or the limitations encountered are more publicly known so that others can learn from what we are experiencing. When we get to the conclusion of the grant, we're typically interested in evaluating our investments across a set of metrics that everybody heard about in the beginning, and I'll just describe a few of them to you quickly. Since we're focused on education, we're very interested in understanding how students have achieved more through the services that have been provided with our resources. So we're looking at stuff like grade point averages and test scores and those kinds of things, but we're also interested in the elevation of the students' own aspirations and the improvements in their attitudes and in their collaborative approaches as described to us by their teachers. So this emphasis on measurable impact is something that really is pervading the field, and it has now become enough of a trend to begin to generate a bit of a backlash. And that backlash recently took shape in the form of a New York Times article that really challenged philanthropy that was focused on discrete measurable goals solely, because it felt that this kind of philanthropy could be driving nonprofits towards shorter-term projects from which they could produce measurable impacts rather than long-term capacity building. And that's a real important consideration. It's a genuine concern. I think the field has to tally this in and to figure out how to harmonize the need for a more patient capital approach with the very real need, especially in corporate philanthropy as well as in other forms of philanthropy, for concrete measurable impacts all along the way. Now let me turn to my fourth trend. There's 7 in total. The fourth one is new resources for nonprofits. So notwithstanding our national economic pressures, there are today more resources than ever available to nonprofits. One clear manifestation of this trend is a high engagement model in philanthropy, in which human capital and financial capital are matched. But another manifestation of this is that there are new demographics rising up to support the sector, and new resources becoming available through organizations like the President's Council on Service and civic participation that President Bush put together. It's a 3-year initiative that just last month decided that it would deliver $1 billion worth of skilled volunteering and pro bono services from business to the nonprofit sector. So you may say, well, businesses have long been involved in providing some level of service in many communities. This is a bit different. This is an effort by the Commission to zero in on providing connections between companies around the country and nonprofits in specific fields where nonprofits have special needs that are often unmet. So the fields are information technology, finance and accounting, marketing, human resources, and strategic planning, all fields which have large, abundant professional bases in the business sector. And I think this is going to actually be a very exciting development. Pro bono service has been a big part of what Goldman Sachs people have tried to do over the years. And when we thought about how to harness that, when the foundation was put together about 9 years ago, we tried to zero in on a couple of areas where we have key competencies like entrepreneurship and leadership, in areas in which we felt we could help nonprofits and the young people they serve in unique ways. In the last 10 years, this kind of hands-on approach has become more and more a part of grant makers' efforts. It's become an important part of individual efforts as well. And volunteering clearly isn't new, but some of the statistics around it are. In fact, the number of college students volunteering grew more than 20% in the 3-year period between 2002 and 2005 to 3.3 million. That's a pretty impressive growth, and it's one that, at least as far as our foundation is concerned, we should be tapping into. And so we try to grab college students to actually work alongside us with some of the young people we support. What is also new about this is that deliberately designed high engagement philanthropy models where individuals and organizations with specific skills make themselves available to nonprofits. It's really picking up some steam. I think some of the business leaders who have decided to create their own philanthropy see this as an area in which they can distinguish themselves. And that's all to the good, because at the end of the day, they are going to be able to encourage others to take on this kind of approach as well. And so we like to cheer them on. Young people are hardly excluded from this skills deployment game. In fact, I recently read about a 16-year-old California high school student who handles, while he's in high school obviously, online organizing for Amnesty International. And so combining his skill set and facility with the technology world, with the needs of that organization, even while he pursues his high school studies, is I think, beginning to become a factor in philanthropy. As I mentioned, it's not just non-financial resources, it's new financial resources as well. and that I want to talk about for one moment. Mission-related investing is also an area that is really catching on. Traditionally, foundations pay out about 5% of their net worth each year, and that enables them to have a predictable outlay for their nonprofit giving and also to exist in perpetuity. And in recent years, more and more people have been scrutinizing that ratio and saying, well, what about the other 95%? That is a resource base that can be deployed to achieve mission-related goals. And that's where this concept of mission-related investing comes in. Now, last fall, Stanford did a little research on this, and it identified, over the last 5 years, an increase in almost 20% of mission-related investing, and that's compared to an increase of only 3% in the preceding 32 years. And so this is really very much on the rise. As the world's largest funder, the Gates Foundation, of course, is uniquely scrutinized, and so it has caught a little flack for not providing as much in the way of mission-related investing as it should. In fact, it doesn't really try to invest in a mission-related way from its endowment. The LA Times decided to take this issue on and reported that hundreds of the Gates Foundation's endowments, totaling at least $8.7 billion, have been in companies that actually countered the foundation's charitable goals or socially concerned philosophy. And shortly thereafter, the Gates Foundation responded that it has a focus on grant making and not on its financial investments. And that's causing a bit of a concern in the philanthropic community because, of course, there is a case to be made for all of those lost resources. So again, a word to the young people from the Clinton School, as you move towards your public service leadership careers, it's really worth considering this area of mission-related investing as a way to drive change. As social investors, obviously, you'll want to evaluate all aggressive approaches, and this is clearly one that is beginning, but will need to be pushed forward much more seriously in the years to come to have the full impact that it's capable of. And of course, as we think about new resources for philanthropy, one of the very most important is young people themselves, Generation Y, as we call them. I have 2 children who are in that group, 60 million strong, born between 1978 and 1991. The 76 million or so baby boomers are aging out of the workforce, clearly, some of us more happily than others. And Generation X is only 48 million strong. And so there is a replacement problem, there's a replacement gap. And Generation Y is beginning to make itself felt. Notorious for playing by its own rules. Generation Y has the reputation of wanting responsibility and recognition early. As Generation Y expert Peter Sheehan has put it, Gen Y is after a sense of purpose, work-life balance, fun, aren't we all, variety, respect, and the opportunity to do real work that makes a difference. The traditional path to philanthropic engagement has been learn, earn, return. Get your education, work, and then make your fortune and give it away as you move into your older years. But so far, Generation Y has decided it isn't buying into that. It's taking a much more integrated approach, and it's having a profound impact on the nonprofit sector. Gen Y is a major factor in driving a number of the trends that I've already mentioned, including, of course, new technologies and high engagement philanthropy. Where would Facebook philanthropy be without Gen Y? And as we think about where we're heading, we're thinking this group is going to be more entrepreneurial even than the most notorious entrepreneurial business and philanthropy leaders of today. Gen Y doesn't see jobs as rungs on a career ladder, but as a collection of personal development experiences, and in the course of those, wants to give back at the same time. So all of these new resources, human capital through higher engagement models, mission investing as a new capital source, and human resources in the form of Gen Y, is bringing public interest organizations into a totally new and different space from what we've seen before. And they're also tied to the next trend, which is blended sector initiatives. And we had a bit of a conversation about that over lunch. I wonder if anyone saw the piece in yesterday's Sunday Times. You may not be big Times readers down here, but that's what they had on the plane, so that's what I read. And the piece was "A Capitalist Jolt for Charity," right on the cover page of the business section of the Times. Traditionally, the concept has been that nonprofits earn no money and survive on donations and government funds, while for-profits focus only on making money and not on solving social problems. Sometimes they may even cause social problems. However, increasingly, the line between the nonprofit and the for-profit sectors have been blurring. And this gets back to the concept of the double bottom line or triple bottom line that some of us were discussing about over our lunch as well. Triple bottom line is increasingly being pursued by nonprofits and by for-profits, and those three parts are financial, environmental, and social impacts or social returns. Some of the most innovative developments today and greatest advances are taking place in this very exciting and entrepreneurial gray area. Let's look at the Grameen Bank, whose CEO was recently provided a wonderful recognition by the Nobel Organization. It's a market tool, microcredit-based initiative that's bringing thousands and thousands of families out of poverty. Social entrepreneurship is another kind of broad category of this, defined by innovative approaches to social value creation while also making a financial profit. First Book is a great organization. I want to tell you just a word about it. It's one that we began to work with when we conducted a competition together with the Yale School of Management for the most exciting, profitable ventures by nonprofits. They submitted a business plan, as did all of the contenders in this competition, but then they acted on their business plan to launch the new First Book Marketplace, a website that markets low-cost, high-quality new children's books to nonprofit organizations and others that serve disadvantaged children. It has a clear social mission, but it also turns a profit by acquiring very large quantities of each title at deep discounts from its publishing partners and selling them to its target markets for $1 to $2 per book, a price that includes a margin for both the publisher and for First Book. It's able to generate funds, which it then uses to support its nonprofit activities. So this is a way of helping this organization to reach more low-income children. And in fact, the number that they reached jumped from 4,500 before the launch of their new marketplace business plan to over 20,000 just a few years later today. So there are lots of these interesting models around, and I do think that this trend is only going to increase in importance. For folks who are just beginning in their public service careers, some of the most exciting opportunities that you may have could be in this area, in these blurry points between the sectors. And so that's something to think about as you build out your careers and make your choices. And now on to the sixth trend. Oh, and there are only six, there aren't seven, there's six. And that sixth one is the globalization of philanthropy, which I think, as we all know, is not unique to the philanthropic arena because our entire world is ever more global. Let me paint a picture for you of what this means. In today's world, ideas capital and the production of goods and services flow seamlessly across national borders. And here are just a few statistics that highlight this reality. The number of multinational corporations has grown from 3,000 in 1990 to over 65,000 today. I find that a staggering growth. Of the more than 30 million workers employed by U.S. multinationals, almost 30% of them today are employed abroad. In developing countries, international trade now makes up 40% of the total output. In developing countries, international trade is around 50% of the total output. And it's not just ideas, capital, and products that are flowing across borders. People are flowing in dramatic ways as well. There are now 190 to 200 million immigrants and refugees worldwide. Since 1990, about 1 million new immigrants per year have entered the U.S. There are approximately now 38 million immigrants in the U.S., and that is the largest number in recorded history. And just to highlight some of the statistics that describe the global markets, the number of middle-income consumers worldwide in 2005 was 1.3 billion. In 2020, the number of middle-income consumers worldwide is expected to rise to 2.3 billion. So again, it's a very, very phenomenal growth that we're talking about. All these numbers mean that new markets will develop and will be the norm for people who want to sell and trade, but also for those of us who think we're going to be working at home, because what will be more likely is that we will be working with coworkers who are across the globe and not necessarily in the cubicle next door. These numbers also represent something far deeper than simple market connectedness. What they represent is our emerging interconnectedness in all ways. Our fates are commingled as never before, and of course this offers special challenges and opportunities for philanthropy. Problems anywhere affect us now more often everywhere. Consider pandemics, market collapses, and inadequate education as a challenge that pervades the globe, and something that philanthropy has to seize and try to address. For us at the Goldman Sachs Foundation, this increasing globalization means that while we started out with about 10% of our giving directed towards the global community, it's now at about 40%, and that's over the course of the last 9 years. And we're very much in line with our peers in this as global companies seek to respond to the changes I've just described. But the globalization of philanthropy isn't just about U.S. foundations giving abroad. It's about the growth in giving worldwide, even in countries that have typically relied more heavily on government support of social institutions. As just one illustration, last year alone, over 1,100 new foundations were established in Germany, and that was a 26% rise from the year before. It's a place we do business, and so we're watching with bated breath as this change is taking place there. Foundations' aggressive response to the needs and opportunities globalization presents is matched by increasing globalization and corporate social responsibility more broadly. In the earliest incarnations of global corporate social responsibility, it was simply a matter of providing funds to communities in which people did work for a company. But that's beginning to change very dramatically. And I think a part of the reason that's happening is that companies are realizing that in order to attract talent, they have to, as the gentleman who introduced me mentioned, you've got to also respond to the increasing interest on the part of candidates for employment to make a difference in the world. And so companies are responding in kind. Young people between 18 and 26 are particularly passionate about this. In a 2007 study, more than 2/3 of them reported they prefer to work for a company that allowed them to contribute their time and talents to nonprofit organizations. So now in the future, companies are going to have to step up their corporate citizenship profiles in order to attract talent. The new school of thinking is designing corporate social responsibility activities that go beyond the simple PR of the earlier days. Nowadays, companies are looking for ways to truly make an impact on society. And an example of this for us has been in launching our Global Leaders Program at Goldman Sachs, where we try to bring together young people from literally 60 countries every year, connecting with current generation of leaders, and then also connecting with each other as they learn about and expand their leadership skill set. Thinking about the future of global leadership is just one way in which globalization is driving our philanthropic giving, and other companies are facing the same demands and looking for similar win-win propositions for increasing their strategic global giving as well. So the trends that I've been discussing, in my mind at least, mean that being strategic for you young people in managing your careers is more important than ever. And that's the case in any quickly changing landscape. But most importantly, these trends mean that there's going to be an ever-increasing opportunity to have impact through your lives and through your work. And so that is probably the note that I should leave you with, because this is truly a moment of great opportunity. And for those of us who are looking at this young generation and cheering them on, it's a time when we can work very effectively together to really break through the walls that have challenged us in our society and in the global one. So I want to stop here and thank you all for coming out, and I hope that we get a few moments to hear from you.
We have time for a few questions. If you raise your hand, we'll bring a mic to you so everybody can hear it. Anybody? Oh, Thisha, right behind you.
Can you speak more to the movement of organizations such as yourself focusing more on the measurable impacts versus capacity sustainability? I know there was a time when capacity sustainability and growth were the focuses of most nonprofits, and now I think according to your trend statement, they're focusing more on measurable impacts. Why is that becoming the more important pattern of major foundations such as yours? And I guess any advice you may have on continuing to focus on that?
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple of reasons, and perhaps one of the most important ones is that within the corporate philanthropic arena, company foundations or giving programs are competing for resources with every other business within the company. And so there is a need to demonstrate return. And the response to that has been to try to do that through these measurable impacts. But that is not necessarily the only important development. I think that there is also an increasing interest in partnerships with nonprofits that help to expose the brand more broadly. And within those partnerships, there's a bit more of an inclination towards patient capital, as we call it, which is investing, but waiting for longer-term returns as the partnership moves through its natural life cycle. And in a partnership, the investment is typically longer than in a single discrete grant program. So it might be an 8-year arrangement, which gives a little more room for some of this capital building to occur, as you've described it. Good. Thank you.
Dan Goodall with Winrock International. I'm just wondering, Stephanie, what can people here in Arkansas do to get Goldman Sachs more interested in what's going on here in Arkansas?
Invite our chairman to speak at this forum.
Well, I mean, of course, obviously, that it's not getting into your basket, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we've got plenty of our own problems right here in education, and now you're here as a first step. But what's the next step for people that are interested in taking this a little bit further?
Yeah. Well, I think part of the case that I would make if I were an Arkansan, is that the correct word? Arkansan. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Is to try to juxtapose some of the compelling challenges being experienced in this state and this region against those in other parts of the world in which companies are willing to invest. And I think this is a little tricky, but one of the interesting drives right now is clearly towards investing in developing regions and developing economies. Yet I think a case can be made for focusing on underdeveloped market segments in our own country, whether it's urban areas in New York or rural areas in Arkansas. And so when I say juxtaposing the context, I would actually try to bring forward some of the compelling statistics that explain why there's such a need and why an impact here can make a difference. And I think that actually could be a pretty aggressive argument, and it's one that we've tried to look at a little bit as our foundation has begun to globalize, because we have to face the reality that within the United States, we have some very compelling opportunities to invest for development as well. So that would be a strategy to consider.
Stephanie, I got one question before we leave. Do you see any trend developing? We're seeing thousands, millions of young people, particularly engaging in the political world this time, particularly inspired many numbers by Barack Obama. Mm-hmm. People giving in small dollar amounts, record numbers. February contributions for Senator Obama going to be a record. Do you think that translates into young people getting more involved, the Generation Y getting more involved in philanthropy and public activity?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a manifestation of it, Skip. I think that even before Barack Obama, that this generation was making its mark and beginning to define its style. And I do see what's happening, obviously, as a wonderful expression of that. But what I think many of us are hoping is that these folks who've been brought into the political process will not only continue to be involved in the political process, but also extend their efforts into the social change movement more broadly, post-election. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. Let's have another round of applause for Stephanie
Thank
Barrows.
you.